Don't hide your head in the sand and not be afraid to look at your numbers. Yeah, when you initially do it, you might get some bad news, but if you don't know, then there's no way you can fix it.
Hello, preppers, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders. I'm so excited today because we have a very special guest. We have Gordon Brewer here to speak with us. Gordon is a therapist, he's a podcaster, he's a trainer, he's a speaker, he's also a writer, and he's a licensed marital and family therapist. And he's the host of a podcast called the Practice of Therapy podcast, which I recently am excited because I got to be a guest on it. And the practice of therapy provides information and resources specifically for clinicians that are starting, growing, and scaling private practices. He started the Crack network of podcasts in 22, and along with a new podcast called the Kindness and Compassion podcast. Now, Gordon has many years of experience working with human services and mental health. He's actually got over 30 years of experience. He's worked within the agency setting as well as in private practice. And he is an owner of a group therapy practice called the Kingsport Counseling Associates that's located in Kingsport, Tennessee. And I'm excited today because we're going to talk to our therapists out there. And I know that some of you guys are not therapists, but maybe there's some things that you might glean from it if you're in the medical field, or it's also good to know about what's going on in different industries. So I'm excited to have this conversation with Gordon where we're going to talk about challenges that therapists are facing and really how to optimize their profitability today. So please join me in welcoming Gordon to our platform. Hey, Gordon, how are you doing today?
Hi, Suzanne. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's great to have you with us today. This is a great conversation because I think that the medical field has gone through a lot recently in the world of insurance, just even like Obamacare and no Obamacare, and just a lot of different things that have happened in the world of therapists that have an impact not only on the practice, but on profitability. And I'm really excited today. So first of all, maybe we can start with talking about your background, your experience in therapy, your businesses that you've run, and what brought you here to this conversation.
Yes. So, one of the things that people hear me say on my podcast a good bit is just I've learned a lot the hard way, and I don't think everybody needs to do it that way. I started out as a solo practitioner in as a therapy practice, and then in 2014 I started a group practice. And really, there's several different models of practices that people can encompass. I've got a blog post about that, but there's so people can either start a practice as, hiring people as contractors, or they can hire people as employees, or they can do what I like to call a co-op model where you share expenses to run a group practice. But one of the things that I figured out or learned the hard way was when I started my group practice, I was really struggling financially to keep up with it. It was kind of like I was, every month or whatever is kind of like, am I going to have enough money to pay my people, what we said we're going to pay them. And so it really became stressful for me during that period. And then I learned about Profit First and read Mike Michalowicz's original book. And it was just a total game changer for me to think about just money and finances differently. Most of us that go into practice, whether it's as a therapist or medical field, that sort of thing, we get little to no training on the business side of things, especially if you're in private practice. And I think a lot of us start out in, kind of an agency setting where kind of the money and all of that sort of thing is handled on the back end, and all we do is the clinical work. But one of the things that I think draws people into private practice is just the autonomy it gives us and the ability to set our own schedule. So, but part of my story is I realized when I started, I finally took my head out of the sand, and I started looking at my numbers, and I realized that I was paying my people out of what I was earning for myself rather than having them pay for themselves as they went along. And so that was a big wake up call for me. And so I was using kind of a contractor model where I paid people, I guess for people in other businesses, it'd be kind of like a commission structure where you give people a percentage of what they bring in. Or, one of the ways I've heard it termed, I don't know if this is a good way to put it, but you eat what you kill kind of thing. And so, anyway, I realized that I was having to supplement what they were doing out of what I was earning for myself. So it just really took a big hit on what my earning potential was. And so when I started looking at my numbers and really trying to figure it out, I switched over from being a contractor model to having W-2 employees. And actually, it turned out to be better for them, but also better for me in that I finally became profitable as a practice, and that I was paying realistic numbers to those people per case and that sort of thing, and was able to track it better. And then, of course, using Profit First, where which to me is just the power of allocation, of being able to say, okay, the money that comes in I've heard it put this way, every dollar has a job. And so you allocate what job each dollar has. And so that was a total game changer for me. And and then just being able to, I know as you mentioned at the beginning, just having to work through all of the ins and outs of insurance, because I'm an insurance-based practice. Not all practices in the mental health field are that way. Some are just simply cash-based, which is simpler to do. But I felt like for the demographics of my area, we needed to be insurance-based and offer that as part of our services.
I love that. And I love your discussion too. You're right. I meet so many entrepreneurs, and when they first bring on their team, they bring on contractors, right? And they bring on contractors because, they want to lower that cost, right? They want to not pay that matching Social Security and Medicare, hopefully not have unemployment claims. But reality is, as contractors, one, there's legal risk, right? If that person isn't bringing their own equipment, or if they're showing up on your schedule, right? If they don't actually see other clients outside of your business, which you might not want them to, right? Because now you've got competitive issues, right? They have a claim that in the event that you let them go and they go apply for unemployment, that you may owe back wages, right? For payroll taxes. And so it's not just a risky business, but it can be an expensive business with that too. So Gordon, thanks for bringing that out. That's very, very true with that. And I love to hear your Profit First journey too, and how it really turned around your business and changed your businesses from that standpoint too, which is really good. Now, I know therapists, they deal with some different issues than normal businesses because, first of all, it's a heart-based business. In many cases, people get into therapy to really help people. And when you look at their financials, you look at the gross margin, which is the revenue less the cost of service. So that person that's doing the job, right? When you subtract that out of revenue, that's your gross margin. It tends to be lower than a lot of other businesses, right? In some cases, because it's very insurance based and things like that. So tell me about just some of the challenges that you've seen with that, and how do you work around that?
Yeah. So one of the things, just from looking at your books and looking at your financials, is having a clear picture of what, with the insurance-based practice, what you get per session can vary depending on your insurance contract. Some insurance companies pay better than others, and others don't pay so well. And so you have to know what your average per session rate is. And also being able to have also, in addition to people that pay via insurance, is also having, I think it's helpful to have a good number of people that are private pay as well, because not everybody, either their insurance doesn't cover mental health services, although that's changed a lot here recently. I mean, most all insurance does, but we did have some that didn't cover that. And there are some people that just didn't want us to file with their insurance because of privacy and confidentiality. And so we'd work out, in my practice, we have a sliding scale that's based on family income. And so what their fee is, if they're not using insurance, is based on that. And so Yeah, and so knowing what your average per session rate is real important to know, because that way you can gauge what you're getting per session. And then you budget or you allocate everything else around that particular figure. So what I pay my therapist is based on what I know I'm getting on average per session, as opposed to just arbitrarily coming up, okay, well, I'm going to give them X amount. It's based on the numbers on the front end. So, yeah, so that's an important piece there as well. The other thing I would say, if you're an insurance-based practice, is to weed out those insurance companies or those panels that are just not going to be worth it for you to be part of. I think it's a mistake for providers to just say, well, I'm going to be on every insurance panel and accept any insurance. Well, there are some that, number one, you're not getting enough volume for it to make any difference. Number two is that their rates are so low that it really is, you can do better by filling up your caseload with those insurance companies that are paying the higher rates, or you have a higher contract rate with. So that paying attention to those things, and also from a cost standpoint, the more you can automate stuff, the better you're going to be, because the less hands that touch it. So, for example, in my practice, I use an electronic health record system called Therapy Notes. And so it files the claims automatically and all of that sort of thing. And so there's not a lot of hands-on stuff. My admin just has to go in and click a few buttons, and the claims are filed, rather than spending hours of time trying to fill out claims and send them in and that sort of thing. So automation and having the right systems and processes in place can go a long way in making you more profitable.
Oh yeah, it's much better in the old days where you had like paper files, and then you have to go
Yes.
back and fill that information out. So this is, embrace that technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
Use less people and automate more is really, really important. Now I know in Profit First, one of the things that we like to see is a 3x, 4x on payroll. I like to push my clients to get 5x if possible. Now, in your experience in therapy, what type of multiple are you seeing on payroll in comparison to revenue? And what's the difference between the ones that are reaching that target versus the ones that are not reaching that target?
Yeah. So one of the things is you have to kind of what I alluded to in the beginning. I think creating a pay structure that that whether they do just a little bit of work versus a lot of work, either way, you're not going to lose money on that. Now, you're certainly, the more volume somebody does, the more money you're bringing in, but also your costs go up as well. So that's why I like Profit First, in that it's based on a percentage. And so, yeah, so in therapy practices, your highest expense is your employees, because you don't have, cost of goods or anything, or any sort of service business. And so I think it's good to have your TAP, as Mike McAllowitz puts it, of your employee cost to be anywhere from 50 to 70%. 70 would be pushing it on the high end. And then I think a good profit margin for most practices is going to be anywhere from 10 to 20% profit margin. So, yeah, that's what seems to be an industry standard. Another Profit First accountant that I think we talked about, and she's got a book called Profit First for Therapists. Julie Harris has got a great. She's done a lot of work into what are some good percentages to base your practice on, just depending on the size, and of course those change around according to the size of your practice.
So the ones that are getting 50%, right? So a 2x on cost versus 70% where you're, what is that, like one, so a
Mm-hmm.
1x and some change on that. Tell me about the differences between those practices.
Yeah, well, I think one is deciding whether or not you're going to pay a salary to your people, or do it as a kind of a, I like to call it an incentive based system, which is what I use in my practice. So I tell my people it's up to you what kind of caseload you want to carry. I'm not going to put any pressure on you on that. But the more people you see, the higher percentage you're going to get on what you get paid per session. So and it's just based on a monthly percentage, and so it just goes up. So their base, I pay them a flat rate per session, and then as they go up in their numbers, their flat rate goes up. With a salary based system, though, that's where you really, as the practice owner, have to really push to make sure they're keeping their volume up and they are carrying a certain number of people on their caseload. And so I think that's where the big difference can come. I think where people are paying their employees a salary and their caseload drops, of course, that percentage is going to go up. But if they can keep their caseload up, then the percentage puts it back down to the 2x, area. So,
So it's important to watch the chargeability rates, right? Making sure that you've
hmm
got high utilization, like 80% utilization on your people,
right.
is really, really important, and rewarding people for longevity of those, maintaining those relationship with those clients. We've seen people go into group
Yeah.
programs, therapists, that are really building brand recognition too, are able to kind of get out of that insurance world and charge a premium on that. So tell me about, I think that we have quite a few listeners that are in the medical field, and
hmm
I think we've seen a lot that's happened in the world of insurance, right? And I know, Gordon,
hmm
you kind of hinted on it, that not all insurances are equal, right? And
hmm
and some insurances will have you doing charity work versus profit first, which is okay if that's your heart, to have that
hmm
set aside to do charity work. But let's talk about what are you seeing in the world of insurance right now, and how is that impacting profitability with practices?
One thing I will say is that on the mental health side, I can't speak as much to the medical side because we're more mental health providers. Insurance companies are really starting to pay better than they were because they're recognizing the value of it, and also just a lot of us have given a lot of voice of look, you've got a doctor that's spending 15 minutes for an appointment, whereas we're spending up to 50 to 60 minutes with people. That's worth more. And so there's been a lot of pressure on insurance companies are really looking at our value. And certainly, just I think in recent years with COVID and that sort of thing, there's less stigma around mental health issues and around people that are struggling, with anxiety, depression, or whatever. People are more willing to talk about it and are starting to come to us more. We have no lack of trouble with getting business right now, and that's, I know not every therapist is that way, but our caseloads stay full, and so yeah, and so it's a nice problem to have, but also then you look at, with my own practice, I need to expand, need to add more clinicians and then finding the clinicians and all of that sort of thing. And so I think with the insurance piece, it's getting better, but I think you've got to kind of hold your ground and also negotiate with insurance companies about your rate. Don't just take what they give you on the front end, and being able to say to them, okay, look, this is a unique service we're providing to your patients, to your people. This is what we're willing to accept for that. And if not, you say we're not going to contract with you.
I love that. So really collective, right? Collective bargaining, and joining organizations such as the one that Gordon has, where you can get together with other therapists, right? Because there's power in groups, right? And being able to
Mm-hmm.
negotiate with those forces that be, right, is really important from that
Mm-hmm.
standpoint, that collective bargaining there.
Right.
And it's always interesting too to see how the world is going, and I'm glad that things are going well or getting better with the insurance, because I think, COVID, I don't think that many people got away with not having a significant change, right?
Mm-hmm.
With their mental health, just with just how things change. People coughed and he was like, oh my gosh, that just gave you anxiety there.
Yeah. Right.
Cough used to
Uh-huh.
be a cough, but now cough can be a death sentence to some
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure is. And we got so isolated, and we need to be around people, and getting isolated just really created a lot of difficulty, particularly for children, having to do online schooling and not having that interaction with peers, and that's so important for their development and being able to have a healthy life.
Definitely, definitely with that. And I'm always curious too, with businesses, we talked a little bit about before we actually got started about the importance of really knowing your numbers and being able to make decisions. And we touched upon metrics, right? We talked about chargeability and percentage of utilization rates. We talked about gross margins, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are some KPIs or key performance indicators that therapists should be monitoring to really keep a pulse on their company?
Well, one is that you spoke about is patient retention or client retention. Being able to, balancing the ethics of it all versus, the profitability of it all. With mental health, coming to therapy, it's not like a one and done kind of thing. You have to develop a relationship with a therapist and that sort of thing. So you want to look at your retention rate. As I mentioned, also, you need to look at what your average per session rate is, particularly if you're insurance based. And so you want that to constantly be going up, year in and year out, and being able to look at that. Also collections. Are you collecting from everyone that comes to see you, and not just letting it slide and that sort of thing? And so I think that's important. Other things are, what are your referral sources of being able to look at, okay, where are the most of our new people coming from, and being able to hone in on that. If you've got like a doctor or somebody that's constantly referring to him, you want to develop that and make sure that that's still happening. Also, certainly a website is real important in this day and age, and are you getting good SEO and being able to make sure that people are finding you? Those are some of the key things that I would say. And just being able to, set realistic goals for yourself. Looking at one thing that people ask hear from me all the time is put a lot of emphasis on what is your why. Why are you doing what you're doing, and what are your ultimate goals with that? Why do you want to be in private practice? Why not just go work for an agency or something like that? But just really being clear about that for yourself. And then the financial piece tying into that, and the lifestyle you want to maintain for yourself. Certainly there are 7-figure therapists out there. And if that's something you aspire to, figure out what you need to do to get yourself there. And if it's not, that's okay too. I mean, in my own practice, I've kept it kind of small, but I'm also profitable, and there's not a lot of overhead for me, and I'm living the kind of lifestyle I want to live. And so I think that's what's important.
I love it. One of the things that I see in therapists, particularly, and even in a lot of healthcare industries, people get into it because it's their calling. They want to serve a challenge demographic, that healthcare may not be accessible to, and they feel that that's their calling. And there's always this internal battle between profitability and what do I really want, my why, right, as we called it,
Mm-hmm.
versus doing good in the world, right? And obviously, Gordon, you've coached many therapists. Tell us some things that we need to consider in balancing the good that we want to do in the world and the profitability that we need to
Right.
hire the best and the brightest, right? To
Yeah.
sustain our own families. How
Right.
do we balance that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and a lot of it has to do with our money mindset. That's something a lot of times in the consulting that I do is I really work with people around, okay, how was it that you learned to think about money? And a couple of stories I like to tell about that is, one of the things is that if you're not making a profit, then you're not going to be able to continue to do the good that you want to do. It's it's like when we go to fly and they talk about the the safety procedures we go through, and they talk about the cabin losing pressure and the oxygen mask coming down. The thing they tell you to do is put your own on first before you try to help anybody else, because if you're not taking care of yourself, you're not getting oxygen yourself, you're not going to be able to help anybody else. So it's important to keep that in the back of your mind, and that there's, making a profit isn't a bad thing. Making a profit just means what you're doing is sustainable over the long haul. The other thing is, I think really looking at what are the messages we got about money when we were growing up. My dad, God rest his soul, he was not a good money manager. He never learned how to manage money. He was a pastor, and he was always learned that money came from the goodness of others. And that was kind of a thing and that if you got money, it was a lucky thing. Also, he was a child of the Depression, so, he had a scarcity mentality about money, and tended to get himself in debt a lot. And so that was something that he never learned. So I think it's important for people to really learn about money, learn about how money works, because money is just a vehicle. It's just a means to an end. And I don't think it's helpful to put any kind of judgment on money, because it's just a tool that we use to get us to where we want to be able to help the people we want to help, and all of those things. So I think really doing a big check-in with yourself about how do you think about money, and really taking a lot of the judgment about, is money good, if it's bad, money's evil, all of those things that we get handed as far as messages, and really thinking about it differently.
I love it. I love it. That's really great. And for you guys that are listening are not therapists, this is really great advice too, because you guys struggle with it too, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how many conversations I had where, I've talked to an entrepreneur and I'm like, you can't afford to charge that rate. And they tell me, oh no, that's what the market is. That's what the market will bear. And this is what I have to charge, because I've always charged it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you can't afford it. And I like, Gordon, what you said, it's a tool. Money is a tool. And guess what, guys? I need a lot of tools to do good in the world. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
show us the money,
Right.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, you need to hire the best and brightest people, right? Your
Mm-hmm.
clients want the best and brightest therapists when they come to your office, right? When they drive an hour to sit with you, or even if they're spending time with you on Zoom, right? That hour that I'm giving you to my life for you to help me, I want to be with somebody that's going to help me, right? Not an entry level
Mm-hmm.
person that you're training up. Again, you need money to be able to give the tools to provide your client with the best experience that's going to give them the change. So, very, very good thoughts on that, Gordon. So,
Mm-hmm.
so inspiring.
Yes. Yes. Well, good.
So, Gordon, this has been a really great conversation. I have
Mm-hmm.
so enjoyed it. One of the questions that I love to ask our guests is, as we wrap up, what piece of advice would you leave our viewers and our listeners with? And it can be personal or business.
Yes. Well, I think one of the things is from a financial standpoint, is don't hide your head in the sand and not be afraid to look at your numbers. Yeah, when you initially do it, you might get some bad news, but if you don't know, then there's no way you can fix it. And so learning that, and also for, you know, a lot of us particularly in the mental health field and, medical fields, we said earlier, just did not learn about money or learn about finance. So give yourself the gift of understanding that. Doesn't mean you have to become a CPA or, a financial advisor or anything like that, but just understand it for yourself so that it's not intimidating to you, and you can look at what you're doing and say, okay, this makes sense that the money's going here, and this is how I'm handling this. And also give yourself, I think being able to look at investing over the long haul. We didn't even get into thinking about retirement or all of that sort of thing, particularly for folks out there that might be getting just started in their careers and that sort of thing. Please, please, please put some money aside for your retirement, because I'm approaching that age, and fortunately, knock on wood, we were prepared, and that's not going to be a big burden for me once I do retire.
I love that. I was teaching my 13-year-old. I just started his investment account with Fidelity. And by the way, if you start your account with Fidelity, a lot of times they have these specials where they'll give your child $50 to kind of like start it. So
Uh-huh.
give all your children a gift of $50 to Fidelity.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I asked him, we were playing, we have Alexa, and I was like, Alexa, how much does Emmanuel need to put away every week? Or, if he puts away $15 every week, and he retires at 50, how much money will he have at 20% interest rate? And Alexa goes, $5 million. And of course, his eyeball is bulging out. And I'm like, that's called exponential use of your money. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's X to the squared, right? You could
Yeah.
spend hours of, I always call it butt in the chair. You get paid a certain hourly
Mm-hmm.
rate, right? And the more hours you do, that you're going to add more to that, right? But
Right.
imagine exponential growth. And that's where your retirement's going to do for you. If you're putting money away as you go and you're investing it, right? That's money. I told him, I said, look, you made $30 and you didn't do anything today.
Mm-hmm.
That's where
Right.
your money's going to grow without you having effort. And so, yes, we do have to spend a certain amount of hours in the chair, right? But then
Mm-hmm.
let's invest it so it grows, right?
Right. Yeah.
Exponentially.
Yeah, it's right. Another thing that I talk about is being able to diversify your income streams, because there is you eventually reach a ceiling of how many people you can see and how many hours you can devote each week, and so you reach this kind of glass ceiling, and that's it. So you need to be always looking for other ways to produce other sources of income, going from the one-to-one model of providing services to the one-to-many. So that might be having groups. It might be providing courses, providing, you know, writing a book, or whatever. Of being able to look at other ways to bring in income.
I love it. I love it. Well, Gordon, how do our listeners find you? How do they learn more about you? What's the best way to get in contact with you?
Yes, so probably just to go to my website, practiceoftherapy.com. They can also email me at gordon@practiceoftherapy.com, and that's the best way to get in touch with me. And I've got tons of resources on the website. Our podcast we've had around since 2017, and so I think we're up to episode 315 now. So a lot of great episodes on there for people to listen to, and a lot of great guests that I've had, like you, Suzanne, that have just really added a lot to this whole way of learning. I love podcasts because I think it's a great way to learn stuff and just get new perspectives and see things from a different view. And so I think that's one of the things I like about it. So practiceoftherapy.com.
I love it. And what I'm going to do is for you guys that are driving right now is I'm going to leave that information about Gordon in the show notes so that when you're at a safe place, you can pull over, you can go ahead and subscribe and follow him on his podcast. So thank you, Gordon, so much for joining us today and sharing your wealth of knowledge.
Well, thanks, Suzanne. My pleasure. I enjoyed being here.